Thank you, Lauren. My name is Brandt Thorington. I'm the Director of Government Relations for the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative. We're an organization of 107 mayors along the main stem Mississippi River. We go from Bemidji, Minnesota, all the way down to Louisiana, down to New Orleans. We have a 10-person or 12-person executive committee. We have two co-chairs, Mayor Jerry Cavanaugh of Coon Rapids, Minnesota, and Mayor George Flaggs of Vicksburg, Mississippi. And then we have a mayor from each of the 10 states along the Mississippi River. So we have been going around the world, going to COP27, COP28, COP29, talking about natural infrastructure. And why is an organization of mayors from the middle of America going around the world talking about natural infrastructure? Well, since 2005, we've suffered over $250 billion worth of damage. We've had floods, hurricanes, of a really bad drought recently, which nobody thinks about on the southern end of the Mississippi River. You talk about Louisiana has had really horrible saltwater intrusion, which has threatened the drinking water in New Orleans and the surrounding areas because they pull all their water from the Mississippi River. So what we've done is we've come up with a program with Ducks Unlimited to deploy over 100,000 acres of natural infrastructure along the Mississippi River. It's vitally important that we do this, and our mayors have been great evangelists for this. You see Mayor Cavanaugh right there in Dubai. He had a great time. He is one of our best mayors. He has been doing a great job. And the B Branch project, which he is going to talk about, is a national model for flood prevention. If you talk to the Flood Coalition, they preach the good work of the B Branch and what the city of Dubuque has done there. And I'm going to toss it over to him to talk more about that project.
Thank you, Brent. How's it going? How's your Friday? Is this one of those summits where you like party hard on Thursday night and then Friday's just really long, or what's it like? No, everybody's like, no, not really. No, it's been pretty good. Has it been? So I'm be honest with you, I'm only in here for this today. So has it been like, did you start on Wednesday and then go through? Okay, cool. Shout out some states. Where's everybody from? I already met Mike from Madison here. So we got Wisconsin. Give me some others. Missouri, lots of Missouri. Nebraska. Okay. Wisconsin. Where are the Iowans? Hey, how you doing? Where are you from? Oh, cool. All right. So I'm a Hawkeye. So this is actually really hard for me to be here, is what I'm discovering. I got like right into enemy territory. This was really difficult. But I really appreciate this invitation to come here. So and thank you to Brandt and MRCTI. Let me just give you some quick background, and I think it might be helpful. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about Dubuque and some projects. How many of you are familiar with Dubuque and some of the things that we've done? Anybody know Gina Bell, our sustainability coordinator? Yeah, our director there. She's wonderful. She actually traveled to Dubai with us when we got to go to COP. So I am in my 4th year as mayor in Dubuque. I'm originally from there, lived around Iowa for a while. Like I said, I went to the University of Iowa, lived in St. Louis for 7 years, came back to Dubuque finally, and I ran for city council and was there for 2 years, and then got elected as mayor in 21. So I'm up for re-election this year. The whole time that I've been involved with, since I've been mayor, I've been involved with the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative. I didn't really know that much about it at first when I was on the council. I learned about it pretty quickly and realized that MRCTI is one of the really great things about having an organization that is all based around one natural resource, which is the Mississippi, is that we realize how much we share in common with all of our neighbors to the north and the south. So, for instance, the drought that happened in Louisiana, we experienced that along the Mississippi, but it wasn't anything like, we don't get our drinking water from the Mississippi. They had to actually take barge loads of drinking water down to some of the cities in Louisiana to be able to make sure that people had a source of drinking water. So you realize pretty quickly how interconnected we all are. And I say that because I think it's part of the project that I want to describe a little bit here. There's 2 things we're going to mainly talk about. The first thing I'm going to talk about is our B Branch project. It's essentially a tributary of the Mississippi River, and it's on the other side of the flood wall so we have a good flood wall that keeps the Mississippi away from our front door. But on the other side of that, we have a lot of flooding issues, and we've had them for a long time. There are basically 6 presidential disaster declarations from like 99 to 2006 or something like that. So that's the first project I'm going to talk about. And then we'll get into the Ducks Unlimited work, which I think was the main reason that Brandt invited me to come and talk with you today, to think about the future and what we're actually doing along the Mississippi there. Because this work that I'm going to describe now actually started back in about 2001, give or take. There was some major flooding that occurred that basically led to a huge project. Thank you, Brandt. A huge project that went along there. So is anybody familiar with the B branch? Has anybody seen this presentation? Okay, so I know how in depth to get. Okay, I got a couple people here. The funniest thing about this, I had almost nothing to do with any of this. Like as mayor, I've basically done one thing, and that's put new pumps in the flood wall to pump the water out that gets, the storm water that's there. That's one thing that I was actually able to accomplish on the city council. I have presented about this project more than anything else as mayor. This is what people want to know about Dubuque. And there's a couple reasons why. One, it's a marvel of engineering. I mean, it's incredible what they were able to pull off and over time. It's also a really great example of when a community gets involved and drives a project, they turn it into something more than just a ditch. They turn it into something that's actually going to be a beautiful centerpiece for the whole community. So what we're talking about here is, well, let me give you the reasons why first. This is a video quick that's, let you watch it.
43 visibility out west from all zero. Go ahead and put me around to that memory out here and have 107 disregard. Yeah, we're still moving pretty good down here. It's like a river. 107, the lights on the white northbound.
Sorry, it's kind of dark.
Now, a second, and Kaufman. I was gonna put a message out over the radio stations, but there's still cars coming down Kaufman. The water's so high, they can't steer or stop or anything. We just came through the same thing here right now. It's rocking and rolling out here.
So those are 2 kids crossing the flooded street right there is that last piece that you saw. I think you saw the police car trying to drive and make it through. This was a very regular occurrence for a while. That happened to be in 2010. But basically what we ended up with was lots and lots of damage. Damage to city property, damage to roads, damage to buildings, and primarily damage to people's homes. Over 1,000 people would regularly get water in their basement in this one section of town. And it would basically be the kind of water where your freezer's like floating through your basement. That's how bad it got. And you can see some of the damage that was pretty extensive there. A few more examples of what this would look like. And we would just have these, I mean, a river in the middle of the street would basically occur. And you'd see there would actually damage the roadway. That is an old storm sewer that was just destroyed by things that were flying through there during one of the worst storms that we had. So what the community decided to do was, first of all, put a group of residents and citizens together to be able to say, what do you want to do with this? And they took their time to figure out what they really wanted to have happen. And what eventually came of it was a plan to resurrect an old tributary of the Mississippi River that somebody had buried about 100 years ago and turned it into a storm sewer. It was just a big concrete box. Parts of it were still wooden, actually. And they decided to make it into, not only resurrect the creek that was there, and it's called the B Branch Creek, but make it into a linear park all the way out to the basin that then goes to the Mississippi. So I'm going to, excuse me, Brandon, I'm going to point at some things here real quick. So this neighborhood right here is our Washington Street neighborhood, and this is what would get flooded primarily right there. And then this over here, the river is this way, so it's up over there. And this is the park that I'm going to talk about a little bit. And then you'll see here, it comes down. This is a railroad. Anybody ever work with the railroad before? I always get chuckles when I ask that question. To their credit, they did work with us. It did take a good decade to make it happen. But they did work with us because we basically had to tunnel 6 tunnels underneath the main rail yard right here for Canadian National. I think it was Canadian National mainly. And then what happens is it pumps out here to this part, and then it goes into a basin, and then out of that basin, there's a flood wall on the other side, pumps out into the river. So that's the whole project. And I'm going to just show you some pictures because the pictures explain it so much more. So this is a before picture. It basically was just like a parking lot that was right there, a lot of empty space, and now you can see what it looks like there. Here's another, and this is the same kind of thing. We had, there was an old meat packing plant that sat like right here. That was the Dubuque Packing Company. And that area has been abandoned for a long time. So it's just a big empty lot, privately owned. But we had to work with that owner to make sure that, we kept things clean. But the area around it was just desolate. There was just nothing there. And then this sewer that went underneath now looks like this. So it actually looks like a river, like a tributary. And it's the creek that it's supposed to be. This is the basin, used to just kind of be sitting there, and now we built some overlooks around there. It's a beautiful place to ride your bike, walk your dog, go hiking, and spend a day. I mean, it really is a very fun place to be now. So one more here, this before picture of what it looked like, and then the after picture. So it's this long linear park. The trail follows along there. I just rode my bike there the other day, and there were little ducklings like right at this part right here. And they were a lot of fun, and some kids were just sitting there watching them. And then there's ducks. There's always ducks in here. I saw must have been like a muskrat, river otter of some sort. Like it was actually in this part, and I'd never actually seen that that far up. But we see so much more wildlife there now because you don't see wildlife in a storm sewer normally. You see it where it's out. So this is an example of what this does. So part of the design of this is to allow the water to collect and then filter out slowly. So part of the reason that it's built in the way it is to act as a natural source of water to be able to go up. So hopefully, is there any way, can I get this light off real quick, like this one? I think it'll be easier to see because it is kind of dark still. There, perfect. All right, cool. Is that a little easier for everybody? All right, thank you. We're turning them back on because they're all going to fall asleep afterwards, so we can't do that. All right, so this is just an example. You're going to see the water rise up during the rain event. So it just goes straight up. It's fascinating to watch, actually, when you get a chance to see it. I'll find myself driving down there during a rainstorm just to see it because this is the engineering part of it that's really cool. And it'll stay there. It's going to rain a little bit more, going to rise up a little bit more, and then you're going to see it go back down. And it just sort of drains slowly over time. So there is a point where there's a storm sewer that feeds into it that comes from a part of the, basically parts upstream. And some slides that I don't have here, we built some giant basins farther upstream from this too, to be able to hold the water until it can actually, the rate of water coming down slows down quite a bit from what it used to, because it used to just slam down the streets and come flying out there. So that's what it looks like, and it'll do that. Now you'll be asking yourself, well, isn't there a lot of cleanup to do afterwards? Kind of, but not a ton. I mean, the Public Works Department comes and just sweeps off the sidewalks, but everything else in there is made to get wet and soaked like that, and then basically just kind of pops back in. If you have rain event after rain event after rain event, it looks a little dingy, but it's meant to be what it is right there. And it involves pretty much every department in the city. There's even little poles there that were placed there by the fire department so that they have a place to tie on if they need to go and save somebody in that. That was something nobody thought of until they talked to the fire department. So that was really interesting. One of the questions we always get, and this is the boring slide, unless you really love to go out and get grants and pay for stuff to actually make this happen. But one question we always get is, how did you ever pay for something like this? This is the largest project Dubuque has ever done, $240 million, give or take, for the whole project. It was huge. We're a city of 60,000 people. It's not like we have a tax base to just go and do something like that. But what happened was we had really good people working for the city of Dubuque for years who built really strong relationships. So do you remember when the federal government functioned pretty well? Do you remember this? And I say that not even just in this administration, but I mean, we've had the federal government struggles. Congress struggles. We have had a lot of trouble getting things to actually work. Early on so this reaches all the way back to the George W. Bush administration, and the early years of the Obama administration is kind of when most of this occurred. And what basically happened was the city of Dubuque made relationships in Washington, D.C. and in Des Moines at our state legislature to be able to have the funding from various different sources to pay for different parts of this. So this right here is disaster resiliency funding. So that's things that came from like the US EDA. There was a state jobs grant. You have here EPA environmental funding. We have multiple EPA things. We had brownfield cleanup right here, clean water SRF loans to be able to do some of those things. This is the transportation department. So Tiger grant, which I think was then a RAISE grant. or no, Tiger grant then was a build grant and then was a raise grant. And now it's a build grant, right? Yeah. Okay. I did that right. So it's basically transportation funding to build bridges and, good infrastructure and things like that. And then other things from the DOT that had to do with transportation. And then we had recreation and tourism grants too. So Iowa DNR was involved in this. We had trail grants and all kinds of different things. We put it all together to be able to have a project that we would be able to actually make a reality. And this is just a list of all the different parts of the B Branch project that we actually had to do. So I'll just show some pictures. This is what it now looks like. So essentially we resurrected a tributary of the Mississippi River that was really not there for about 100 years. You regularly see kids from elementary schools all over the downtown area that are going and enjoying it and taking trips there. I mentioned the wildlife before, but you really do see all of this there. There's some pretty good fishing in a couple of spots, actually. It's a great scenic gateway to Wisconsin. So you drive right past this when you're going out to the Wisconsin Bridge and coming this way. There's a part in here that I didn't really talk much about, but one of the cool things we did was we realized that this was originally an amphitheater. Everybody wants an amphitheater at certain places. And what we realized is that it's going to be much more effective as a classroom for that elementary school right there in our National Mississippi River Museum. So that's how we got the grants for it, is we turned it into a classroom, and then all of a sudden, that's something you can pay for. Nobody really wants to pay for amphitheaters, but there are multiple different federal departments at that time, at least, that were interested in that. Lots of miles. You can actually ride your bike from the Lock and Dam at the Mississippi River almost all the way to the Field of Dreams in Dubuque. There's a trail system now that's fully connected thanks to that little path under the railroad I mentioned. And some more people having fun, doing fun stuff there. So I talk about all this because this is actually, and do you want me to go into the Ducks Unlimited part here? Okay. So, and how much time do we want for questions? Okay, cool. I'm going to talk for the next 40 minutes. So the reason I've mentioned all this is because Dubuque really has sort of built its reputation now around this idea of conservation and sustainability and resiliency. It's a reputation that it doesn't just occur. I mean, we have to keep working at it. And I'm finding that in my role as mayor. I mean, I have to fund these things. My council and I have to fund these things. We have to keep going. We don't do as well at that sometimes as I'd like. I'd like to be able to do even more than we can. There's a lot of hard decisions you have to make. But one of the things that I do recognize in Dubuque is that this idea of sustainability and resiliency is absolutely a part of who we are and all the things that we do. So you talk to any department, and it seems to be part of the language that they use. When we talk about being a resilient community, we talk about being sustainable in certain ways. That meaning might change over time, depending on, for instance, who's in an administration in Washington. But for Dubuque, it really has become a part of our culture. And this is another example of that, is another project I want to talk about. So there is an island right in the Mississippi River. So this is the river over here on the right side of your screen. This is what we call the Piasta Channel. It just runs around this little island here. The island is called Chaplain Schmidt Island. Chaplain Aloysius Schmidt was the first clergyman to die at Pearl Harbor during the attack on Pearl Harbor. There's a story, he saved a bunch of people through a porthole in one of the boats that was going down, and then just kept on saving people until the boat sank. And he didn't live through that. So we named it in honor of him, and there's a veterans memorial there too in honor of him. But this island has a casino on it. This is the Q Casino, and it is one of two nonprofit casinos in the United States. We have something called the Dubuque Racing Association. You might remember when there was Greyhound racing, and it essentially saved Dubuque. I'll be honest, it really did. We were dying after some major issues in the 1980s. John Deere laid a bunch of people off. The packing company laid a bunch of people off, and a lot of people left Dubuque. And it was really hurting our economy. They opened a Greyhound racing track, turned it into a nonprofit that then gave money back to the city of Dubuque to keep property taxes lower, and then also gave money to nonprofit organizations. So we give out money to nonprofit organizations on an annual basis to fund a lot of the great work that goes on. I tell you this because this casino needed to have an upgrade, and we came up with a master plan for this entire island. And as part of that master plan, we realized, okay, we want to have fun. There's a casino there. There's a family fun zone. We are actually putting an amphitheater right there. We did get some money for that to do that one. There's a new hotel going up at that spot. Down here's our ice arena for our Dubuque Fighting Saints. They actually beat Madison in the playoffs. I was at the game. It was phenomenal. So The Butte Fighting Saints are down here. There's some more sports stuff here. There's boat ramps down. Actually, I forgot I have another slide. That's the southern part. So there's the ice arena, boat docks, things like that. So part of this master plan, I'm going to go back one, along with all those fun things and those things that are going to drive economic output, there are major natural habitats and natural resources along this island, and it became a part of the master plan. There are 2 whole sections that talk about not only the floodplain and what that's going to mean, but also the environmental impacts and the ecological parts of the island. There's a campground right here that people just love because you're right on the Mississippi. Like, you're just right on essentially the main channel, and people love camping there whenever they can. It floods every time the Mississippi floods, so there's a lot of times people can't camp there. But we don't want to get rid of that because people really like it. And right behind it, there is a whole bunch of trees and like a wooded area that's right there. So a couple things highlighted on this map. This is what we call our heron pond. There's a pond right here. There's some wetlands right there. Some more wetlands that are right there. And then I'm going to go one more slide ahead again. And you can kind of see some area that could be wetlands here too. So this is where we get into this idea of what Brandt is going to talk a little bit more about with Ducks Unlimited. So MRCTI and Ducks Unlimited have been working together for the last few years to try and create projects along the Mississippi that will help with conservation and especially wetland conservation. So what Ducks Unlimited did in Dubuque was they got one of those grants from the DRA actually, and then they did a study of this island so they could figure out ways that we could improve along the island in the way that we're hoping to do with the master plan. So one of the biggest things that they talked about, which is really interesting. So the river flows obviously north to south. When it floods, the outer parts of the island first. One of the things they realized is there's an opening right here at Heron Pond, and it's not open here. So the water just comes flying in, brings all the stuff with it, the trees and everything that's flying down the river when things are flooding. It just jams up in there and creates all kinds of issues with erosion and all that. So they have a really simple idea of they're just going to close this off and open it up here. So the water actually flows more naturally this way and doesn't flood everything so quickly and so badly when it does. Along with that, the plan would be to excavate some of these areas here and then some of this stuff here. And then I'll finally go to this next slide one more time. And then excavate these wetlands down here. So you actually have wetlands that can sit there and be a natural spot for birds and other wildlife to be able to settle there. So that's the plan. Right now, we're in the process of figuring out how are we going to do this. So we have an idea of what we can do. They've looked at it. Now the question is, how are we going to pay for that along with all the other things that we're doing? So we have a history of being able to pull that off. Hopefully, we can continue to build the relationships we need to make that happen at the federal and state level. Even though it's hard, we're still going to do it. I'm going to Washington in a week and a half, actually, to try and do that one more time. Because I do think that even when things are challenging, you still have to be humans about it. You still have to try to build relationships with people. One of the things I notice when I go to Washington, D.C. is that the people that are working for our members of Congress and for the various different agencies, especially when you get below the levels of leadership, there are still really good people that really want to do good stuff there. There are some people that want to be able to accomplish some of these things. They want to not just come here to see this because they want to do like a ribbon cutting. They want to actually see it because they like the idea of a project like this being a reality. I mean, we all kind of want to be a part of something bigger, right? And I think there are a lot of people that do that too. So I think it's important that we keep trying to not only fight against the things we need to fight against, but also try and build the relationships like people so we can try to get some of these things done. So that's our project in Dubuque. I think, Brandt, maybe you can talk a little bit more about the rest of the river and other ways you do this, and then we'll be happy to take some questions. Oh, please. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's actually never been completely dry. Even like during times of a lot of drought, it'll be low. It'll be very low. But most of the time, its actual natural state is down kind of below. It's built, it's just like a little bed for it to be in, and it's kind of in that spot most of the time. So the water's flowing pretty naturally through there most of the time. Yeah. Yes. So the question is, do we have to worry about hazardous sediment and runoff coming into that creek and things like, so it's still a storm sewer, right? I mean, that's what it is. So yes. And you'll see that a lot of things like garbage from upstream comes floating down into this. And absolutely, we need to worry about that. So one of the parts of what we've done with this whole project from the beginning is education. There's a lot of signs in Dubuque that will tell you that you're at the Bee Branch Creek. And it might not look like it's the Bee Branch Creek at all, like you're going over some road, but there's a sign there that says you're at the Bee Branch Creek. It's a recognition that we're trying to create that everything is interconnected. So it's really education to try and, market that idea to people and make sure that they recognize what their role, what all of our role is in keeping that water clean. So absolutely, it's a part of it. The work is never done. There's always some level of garbage that you have to deal with and going through that. No, there's nothing like that. It would be the same types of hazards you're going to get in any regular storm sewer. So runoff from the streets, that kind of thing. The retention ponds that are upstream probably help quite a bit with anything else that's going to be there, but there's no major industry that's really polluting any of that, if that's kind of the nature of your question. Yeah. Okay, cool. We'll do some more questions here in a bit, but thank you very much.
Thanks, Mayor Cavanaugh. That was great. And that's a great example of what we are trying to do on the Mississippi River and how all the cities want projects like the Bee Branch. And we're working with Ducks Unlimited the same way Ducks Unlimited is currently working with Dubuque to identify those areas where we can do all these projects. And as you can see from right here, it's the Mississippi River Basin. Huge, gigantic, 31 states, 2 Canadian provinces, 40% of the continental US. And we're talking, it's responsible for 40% of US agricultural output. The amount of grain that's moved on the Mississippi River is billions of dollars. This is industry. This is all the reasons that's keeping our country going. It's so critical to what we need, providing drinking water, not just down in Louisiana, but all along the river. We're pulling water from there. So using these wetlands, deploying these wetlands will help to clean that water. It's going to help to keep the industry going. All these projects together make such a meaningful benefit. And you can look at right here, these are the main areas in which we're focusing. A lot of them are confluence areas where other rivers come in, like the Missouri, like the Illinois, like the Arkansas, Ohio, all of those. But what do the benefits of this project in totality mean? We'll be able to relieve 8 hours of peak flooding from the 2019 levels. 2019 was the longest flood on history on the Mississippi River. So 8 hours of flooding is exactly what happened in Bee Branch. Once we're able to take those levels down and hold that water, we provide significant benefit to our cities and to all the people and all the businesses that work there. So it's also going to capture 11.5 million pounds of nutrients. Additionally, it's going to sequester 230,000 tons of carbon. It's incredible. Overall, that means it's going to be 30% of the president's non-power sector NDC goals. So the goals that he set out in the Paris Climate Agreement, we're going to be able to reach partially almost a third of those just doing projects like these and deploying natural infrastructure. It's going to protect all these vulnerable communities. It's going to do all this. It's 100,000 acres, 9 states, 45 cities. So what are some other types of these projects and where are we on this? Well, here's an example right now. We've got Horseshoe Lake, which is right across the river from St. Louis, Missouri, right above East St. Louis, Missouri. So you can sort of see, up over here. So you can see it's an old oxbow of the Mississippi River. That's a view from the wetlands actually to the Mississippi River. And here's a diagram of it. So what happens when it floods is all the water from up here in Granite City and all these communities and down north, they're drained to go down south into East St. Louis, Missouri. So what happens is now all of a sudden, instead of the drainage system pushing that water into East St. Louis, we actually have pumping stations that are moving the water into Horseshoe Lake, and it's protecting East St. Louis. And we've done additional restoration along Horseshoe Lake to provide some of that additional resilience for that greater community. It's a huge help, and we've seen it help. Just a few years ago, East St. Louis saw a huge rainstorm, and we didn't even have the project complete yet, but we still saw benefits. We still saw measurable benefits for East St. Louis and other cities just because water was moved into Horseshoe Lake, protecting it. And additionally, on the Mississippi River, we've got several other projects going. Right now, we've got projects in right around here in the Memphis area, between Memphis and West Memphis. There's we have a DOT Protect Act grant that's going to protect, I believe it's the Hernando de Soto Bridge, which got a huge crack, cost millions of dollars every day when that happened. We're building a wetland to further protect that bridge, to further protect West Memphis and Memphis. We've got another grant up here in the Quad Cities to provide for a reserve conservation partnership program through Department of Agriculture. It's going to work with farmers, and it's going to help improve the Duck Creek. We've also got another RCCP program in Illinois, and we've got a state program to work with farmers in Missouri. Those are all things that we're currently working on and currently deploying. We still need more resources, and we're still working on more grants to deploy this on a large scale. We have a private funder who's interested in a pretty significant contribution to this. So we are moving forward with bulldozers on the ground currently, and we're in a great position. Happy to take any questions. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm an undergraduate at the University of Wisconsin Eau Claire, and our campus is right along the gorgeous Chippewa River. And a lot of what's along the Chippewa is some gorgeous, gorgeous natural areas, but it's a lot of steep hillsides that are incredibly fragile. How would you recommend we best take action to protect those steep hillsides from erosion and other such harm?
I mean, actually, one thing I'll say about that is, it's interesting because the topography of Dubuque is really similar. I mean, we've got our issue is more that we've got these steep cliffs that are limestone bluffs, and the water just comes flying off of them. And that's part of the problem, is that the city is built around these, and the infrastructure has to be built there. And for us, I think we've kind of set the example in some ways on doing that, but we also always look to other cities and other places to find out what are they doing. I think one of the first questions I always ask as mayor is, okay, who else has already done this? Who else has already dealt with this problem, so we don't have to reinvent something? Because basically our job is to just steal from each other the great ideas that we all come up with. So I think part of it is looking out and seeing that there's probably somebody else that's dealt with a similar problem, and trying to research a little bit more about how that would work would be one step I would suggest.
Yeah, I think bringing in experts, Ducks Unlimited has been great to work with us. People who have that expertise and some of that local knowledge. I mean, you've got to build that coalition to go ahead and do that. And the great thing about natural infrastructure is it's all built toward the community it serves. It's not cookie cutter. You don't want to just replicate a certain program, in one place. It needs to be built for that location.
Thank you for that presentation, and congratulations on all the fabulous work that you've done over the years. But Brandt, you had mentioned some of the projects that you have with the U.S. Department of Agriculture and with farmers in the region.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit more about that? And I'm particularly interested if the focus is on regenerative agriculture, if it's focused on biodiversity. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, a lot of it's done with regenerative agriculture. Some of it is taking farmland out of production, farmland that typically floods. Like from what we found, because the basin is so big, working outside of our communities with maybe some of the more rural parts. So it's in Scott County, Iowa. So you don't necessarily want to stop flooding along Duck Creek in the Quad Cities by just taking action in Bettendorf and in Davenport. So we're working further up the creek in Scott County to work with those farmers to sometimes take those land out of production when they flood frequently. Yes.
That was actually my question. Thanks for the presentation. So I mean, a lot of your efforts are focused on that main stem Mississippi River corridor. I was curious what opportunities there are for leveraging partnerships again, because a lot of the things, at headwater systems, like not even just the counties along the river, but Ohio River system, Wisconsin River, Minnesota River, things they can do upstream can help you guys downstream. Is there collaborations going on at that level, or what are some of the challenges?
Yeah, a lot of our projects with Ducks Unlimited do have to work somewhat up the stream. A lot of our communities, like Dubuque, have tributaries that flood. So working up those streams are important. And plus, you know, it's cheaper. Like if you're going to set aside and do this in areas that are heavily urbanized, you're not going to get a lot of bang for your buck just because the land isn't there. So working further up in more rural areas makes sense. And our mayors support that because those projects will help their communities.
It's also why it's so important that you have strength in numbers to do stuff like this. I mean, when you have all the mayors potentially a part of an organization up and down the river, and then also collaborating with the Great Lakes Association. I forget the name of the Great Lakes Association. Yeah, the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative, which is, so you've got mayors around the Great Lakes in the United States and Canada. Then when we all show up in one place, which happens at least a couple times a year. So there's one example is the U.S. Conference of Mayors meets every January in Washington, D.C. And these two organizations have now started throwing a regular gathering where we've been meeting at the Dutch Embassy, actually, I think is the last 2 years we've been to talk, so we're all there together. And when you're doing that, then you show up and you have multiple legislators or multiple Congress people that are there all along those waterways. And it's more than just talking to, Iowa and Illinois, for example. I mean, you really have to have that strength in numbers to be able to do it. And I think that's where that partnership becomes more something people can't ignore. It's harder for Congress to ignore that when we show up that often in that large of a group.
So I have two questions, if that's okay. Also, the first one is about decision making with the Bee Branch Creek. You didn't need to build a outdoor classroom. Like you didn't need to do a lot of those things. Like in big infrastructure projects, it seems easy to say like, okay, what's the minimally viable thing that we can build? And how do you decide to go and add those extra steps to make it a more accessible, a more like pleasant place to be when you have to solve this big problem?
Yeah. Yeah. The shortest answer to that is the community has to drive it first. It can't be driven by a city council, for example, or just one mayor who's got some big idea that wants to go and do something. This is one of those examples of a project that was community driven. You don't hear that many people complain about the Bee Branch. It's really expensive. You would think that people would complain about it. There are people, but it is a small handful of people. And the reason is because I think there was a community buy-in before there was the necessary buy-in that came from multiple different city councils over the years. It was, there was one city council that was fairly difficult a few years ago. They didn't really get along very well. This still progressed during that time because there was so much momentum that had already come from the community. So my advice is to make sure that you put a group of community members, not just the elected officials, but the community members together to drive that process from the beginning. And then that helps to keep that momentum pushing through. So I really think that's what happened in this case.
Great, thank you. So my second question is specific to the St. Louis region. So we have the Gateway Arch, and that's the main access, the main area where folks, at least on the Missouri side, have access to the river. The rest of it is industrial and the rest of it is floodplain, or I'm sorry, the flood wall. So do you have suggestions or advice of like how to bridge that gap between like a community that's mostly cut off from the river to bring in folks to have that access to nature, have that access to the river as an amenity for the community?
I think that's some of what fixing up Horseshoe Lake is supposed to be, because it is on the other side of the river, allowing people to connect there. East St. Louis certainly has its issues, and there's certainly a lot that to be done to connect people to the river. And I know the mayor is very interested there. Mayor Powell is very interested in making that happen and doing some development there. It's these development projects, I mean, as B Branch did, can take a lot of time. But I think that's the great thing about B Branch is there's an economic development aspect to that too. Like as soon as you develop that river, all of a sudden that becomes a place where people can connect with nature, where they can get out, they can bike, kids can go out. It's a place for people to connect with the river. And that's really what a lot of our cities want and what a lot of our cities are trying to do. And it's why those other projects with Ducks Unlimited that he was talking about, how you can connect nature and sort of, whether it be the racetrack, hotel, all those other areas, they can work to serve each other and help build, beautify the area, help make it more accessible to people.
Sorry, I keep adding things, but there's a really specific thing about St. Louis that I want to add. So MRCTI actually invited me to St. Louis last December to talk about the B Branch project because the several people on the Board of Aldermen wanted to talk about the river to Pear. So the river to Pear, I think, is your in. So it is a concrete drainage ditch that is just kind of a smelly drainage ditch a lot of the time in certain spots. And I think that that's a place that could absolutely be replicated in the way, to look like the B Branch. And that was the whole idea. And then several of those members actually came to Dubuque for our climate conference that we had last year and visited the B Branch and looked around a little bit. I think that is a place where you can get people a little more connected to the river by not being necessarily right on the river, but recognizing what that means to the river and to the waterways in general, and just having some of that natural area there. But that river to Pear is a perfect example for that. Sure.
You had talked about getting people connected to nature. The Department of Transportation has funding available for organizations that want to support wildlife corridors. And obviously the Mississippi is the Mississippi Flyway, and there's a lot of birds that migrate through that. So have you thought about trying to take advantage of those opportunities to support not only the way people could engage with wildlife and birds, but also working with farmers to adopt regenerative practices that support habitats for birds as they're migrating?
Yeah, I know that's definitely something that we have our eye on from the project that I was showing you on the island. So for certain, I can say that, but on a larger scale.
Yeah, absolutely. As I've said, we're currently in the contracting phase with everything going on in the federal government. It's been sort of paused, but we're working with the DOT Protect Act grant right now between Memphis and West Memphis to protect that infrastructure. So I think that's another one. Yeah, there's a lot of different grants that come from the Mississippi River, including some of the, because it has some of the state park and national park and is a scenic way that we can get some funding from that too. So there are a number of ways we're trying to appreciate funding. Yeah. Mayor Cavanaugh, have you seen sort of economic benefits for the community around B Branch since?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, like home values went up almost immediately. I mean, when things like that get done, absolutely you see economic benefit from it. It was a pretty dead part of town, pretty dead zone. Now there's restaurants there. There are definitely homes that have been fixed up because part of the project actually was we had funding that we accessed to do what we called the B Branch Healthy Homes project. So we actually fixed up some of those homes you saw and use that funding to do that. So people have seen some serious economic benefit from it. Yeah. Yeah, please.
Thank you for that. That actually raised a question for me, which is how was that structured then for homeowners?
Mhm.
The healthy what did you call it?
We call it the B Branch Healthy Homes Project. Yep.
So how was that structured? And is that still ongoing?
It does not have any funding left anymore. No, it was for the first, I'm just going to say probably 10 years, maybe from when that project started. It probably went till the early 2020s, probably is what I'm thinking. Our housing and community development department, so our housing department was in charge of that part of it. And they would basically work with homeowners directly. So the homeowner would apply for that funding, and there was a cap that homeowners could get. There was an income level that people had to meet to be able to do that too. And then it essentially was used for all kinds of things. I mean, it worked on the foundations of homes, put sump pumps in, it fixed up basements. You could put in new hot water heaters and all that kind of stuff that goes into a basement. So it was quite a bit, fixing up mold and mildew and those types of things. So I'm trying to remember as I'm talking where exactly that funding came from. I could have that answer for you, so we can talk afterwards if you want. I know, but I can't remember exactly what grant that was that we got. It was from HUD. I know that much. It was a grant. It was not a loan. Yes. We did not. I'm trying to remember. I don't think we had a loan program involved in that. I think it was actually a grant program that we used. Yeah. Yep. Well, thank you, everybody. This was wonderful. Thanks for the conversation and thanks for having us. We appreciate it.